You're listening to Digital Mobility in Old Age, a podcast by the Digital Opportunities Foundation in partnership with O₂ Telefónica, Germany. Today's episode, AI Companions in Japan, from loneliness to digital love.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of our special series on artificial intelligence. So far, we've talked about how AI is changing our everyday lives, the opportunities it brings, but also the risks. Today we're taking a more personal look, and we're heading beyond Europe to Japan. Imagine this: you're engaged but unhappy in your relationship. You want advice, but you don't want to talk to friends or family. So you turn to a chatbot, ChatGPT. It listens, it gives guidance, and finally it even helps you end the relationship. Not long after, you use the same chatbot to create an AI partner, perfectly tailored to your wishes. Always kind, always attentive, no arguments, no conflicts. Over time you start to develop feelings for this digital companion, and in the end, it even proposes to you. Now, this isn't science fiction. It actually happened last year in the Japanese city of Okayama. There, 32-year-old call center worker Yurina Noguchi married an AI character she created. Legally, the marriage is not recognized, but socially, it sends a strong message, and it shows a trend that's gaining attention worldwide. Chatbots are increasingly used for emotional support, as daily advisors, conversation partners, even romantic partners. At the same time, there's a growing market for virtual friendships and AI relationships, and it's not stopping there. Digital versions of deceased loved ones are now being created, allowing people to continue communicating with them. So what happens when chatbots start replacing emotional closeness? When digital companions feel more familiar than real-life relationships? Could this soon be part of our everyday lives? We spoke with Yuko Itatsu, a cultural and media studies expert and professor at the University of Tokyo. She studies the relationship between humans and AI, looking at social and cultural contexts. One key reason she sees for the rise of digital companions is increasing loneliness, a problem that has become more than serious in Japan.
Loneliness has become a real serious issue in Japan. Over the years, it's become kind of bubbling in the surface, but this past year, the Japanese police offered an official statistic about the number of people who were found dead at their homes who lived alone. And last year, astonishingly, this was 76,000 people. 21,000 people were found at least 8 days after they're deceased. Nearly 7,000 people were found after a month. These are not just elderly people, but people over 65 comprise about 80% of this number. About 780 people in their 20s were also found dead at home. These are really devastating statistics. So this kind of sense of loneliness, not just of the older population, but of every generation, has become an issue that the government can no longer ignore.
Japan has recognized how serious loneliness has become. Since 2021, the country even has a Ministry of Loneliness. There's also a law that requires the government to act against loneliness. The measures are simple but helpful: telephone counseling, and even a chatbot that quickly and anonymously connects people to support services and live chats. The goal is to make it easier to ask for help. And on a local level, programs try to bring people back together. But how did loneliness become such a serious problem in Japan? There are many reasons, as researcher Yuko Itatsu explains.
There are many different kinds of causes. First of all, there are an increasing number of elderly people in Japan. About 30% of the population is over 65, and the number is expected to grow in the next decades. There's also a really great divide between urban and rural areas. There's a real concentration of population in urban areas, and in the urban areas there are more people who work, but also live on their own. It's partly to do with the unstable employment opportunities that exist now in Japan. It used to be a lifetime employment in Japan, but it is no longer the case for many people, especially with the younger people. Because younger people also have less money to spend, it means that maybe also they have less money to engage with their friends and go out. So these are some of the reasons that exist for their loneliness.
Japan is not only one of the countries with the oldest population, it's also aging faster than almost anywhere else. By 2050, the population could drop by about 20 million, then 1 in 4 people would be over 65. In rural areas, entire regions are becoming almost empty, but loneliness is especially a problem in big cities. There, a strict work culture shapes daily life. Duty, conscientiousness, perfection, values Japan is known for worldwide, but as Yuko Itatsu explains, these same values can also lead to social isolation.
Japan, if you visit as a tourist, is very orderly, it's very clean, everything runs on time, and it seems very civilized, and everybody is very hospitable, and they know what the appropriate behavior is. It's because everybody's been drilled this kind of behavior since a very young age. And so at the workplace, this is also expected that they behave a certain way. If you go to even a convenience store, the clerks there will say exactly the same phrase no matter where you go in the country. That's because the training is there for everybody to be exactly the same. So that kind of expectation also extend to family life, to friend life, to all sorts of social life. So I think that kind of high expectation of how you're supposed to behave can also be a bit of a burden. So it's actually no surprise that people might want to actually live on their own and not have to deal with this kind of social burden.
Loneliness can be seen as the flip side of high social expectations and a perfectionism that touches every part of life. Deeply rooted in Japanese culture, these values were long seen as a recipe for economic success. Today, however, they are increasingly becoming a source of stress, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
I would say that it's all of those elements combined that is creating this kind of perfect storm, if you will. Culturally, there's a real long history of Confucianism in Japan, and that basically means that there's an appropriate relationship that you should have with the other person. If the other person is older than you, you need to show respect. They will show you benevolence in return. This kind of relationship is true for any kind of relationship that you might experience in Japan, whether it's the workplace, in society, at large, everywhere, even with a shop clerk. There's also the kind of romanticization of the economic growth that Japan experienced in the 60s, 70s, and 80s after World War II. Somehow that method of diligence and being perfect and striving for a higher level all worked out for Japan to be at the economic level that we currently have. And so there's that kind of collective memory that this was a formula that worked for Japan. Unfortunately, all of these formulas and the kind of past glory is experiencing a bit of a reality check because it's starting to fall apart. And so that's where I think this kind of sense of loneliness is a symptom of that phenomenon that is happening, that things are starting to change. The system can't sustain itself anymore, but somehow there's an expectation that this should still be the way of life. So there's the kind of effort to try to be that, but at the same time failing to do so 24/7.
And this is where emotional AI becomes popular. Unlike real people, chatbots don't have expectations. They can be programmed to match personal preferences perfectly. Of course, the interaction is limited to chatting, sometimes supported by an animated avatar, but in Japan, where social pressure is high, this creates a safe space. People can talk about things they would normally keep to themselves. Problems that would usually stay unspoken can be shared, without ever feeling like a burden.
Maybe this is a bit of a radical opinion, but I also have statistics to kind of back up my point that if people can avoid talking to other humans in Japan, a lot of people would prefer that. The statistics to back that up is a bridal company released some statistics about dating culture in Japan, and more than 45% of men in their 20s, it showed, had never dated, had never had a romantic relationship. And the numbers don't fall too much in their 30s. About 40% of men in their 30s had never experienced romantic love. For women, it's a little bit lower, but it's still 25 to 30%. So 1 in 4 women also have not experienced romantic love in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. That kind of shows something about whether people actually seek out relationships with other humans in Japan. I think people aren't as bothered, or they don't find it to be as attractive of an option to build a relationship with other humans. And so given that kind of background, it makes a lot of sense that humans would prefer to talk to a chatbot that won't make judgments, that won't hurt their feelings, that they won't abuse them in any way, emotionally or physically. And so, yeah, it kind of makes sense to me that they would prefer chatbots.
Chatbots as a more comfortable, easier alternative to human contact. At first, that might sound strange, but in Japan, it could soon become a widespread trend.
Well, I think if the person has experienced any kind of trauma with other humans, maybe they would prefer talking to a conversational AI robot. As we mentioned earlier, if people don't like other humans, maybe that's a better option. I'll also mention that there are people called fictoromantics. And these people actually have romantic feelings towards fictional characters rather than humans. And that's their preferred object of attraction. Of course, these are maybe a small percentage in society right now. But given the fact that more and more people are not wanting human-to-human interaction, then maybe fictoromantics aren't going to be a small population as we think that they are now. And so if that's the case, it's not necessarily because the human has had trauma, but actually just purely they would prefer a robot to a human.
Today, fictoromantics, who feel romantic emotions for fictional characters from books, movies or video games, are still a small group. But with AI companions, which are basically fictional characters you can connect with emotionally, this could become a more common trend in society. And social media could play a key role in this shift, because they are putting as well an increasing pressure on real-life relationships, as Yuko Itatsu explains.
I think the pressure of social media has had a big impact on this. It's not just young people in social media, but I think any generation, the kind of pressure that is put on you to perform in a particular way on social media, and the pressure that you feel is based on the potential judgment that you might feel from not just your friends, but also just a random person who's checking out your account. And I think we've kind of let that kind of pressure seep into ourselves too much. So in that sense, I think just the interaction that you might have with a human might trigger that kind of psychological emotion that, oh, I don't want to be judged negatively by others. And therefore, rather than taking that risk, talking to an AI companion is risk-free in that sense. Or it probably will start out to be risk-free. So that's the kind of psychological circuit that I'm currently thinking about.
Human communication always comes with some risk. On social media, that risk often feels even higher. Every comment, every photo, every post can be judged or liked. Even people who don't post much still share something. And there's also constant comparison with others and unrealistic beauty standards. Chatbots are different. Feedback is almost always positive, but it's not completely risk-free. Yuko Itatsu warns that this trend can still bring serious risks.
The ethical concerns are really important in the sense that the worst thing that we can do using AI technology to address human loneliness is for humans to become even more vulnerable. That's the thing that we must avoid. These are already vulnerable people. Exacerbating that situation is the worst way to use technology. And so making sure that there's no kinds of scamming or fraudulent use is going to be very important. Obviously, digital literacy will be very important to make sure that if the user comes across something like that, they will be able to talk to somebody else or to at least look it up.
AI is not neutral. Behind every system are people and companies with business interests. Virtual companions designed to feel emotionally close are built to keep our attention. They are friendly and make us feel good. That's what keeps us coming back. At the same time, we start sharing very personal information. That brings not only data risks, but also the risk of emotional dependency and manipulation.
The risks are that people will become too overly dependent on AI machines, or that they will be even worse, maybe manipulated. Because technology has become so advanced, it's easier now to kind of narrow down the demographic and target messages to certain people. And of course, that's causing all these issues that we have around the world about our democracies becoming a bit more fragile in elections and whatnot. I think that probably translates to loneliness and AI use as well, in that if people are already in an echo chamber with their social media and they're also living alone and feeling alone, then the damage can be amplified in that way. So I think that needs to be a concern.
The risk of manipulation is real, just like on social media. People who are lonely may be especially vulnerable. Studies show that loneliness is closely linked to a higher openness to conspiracy theories. The good news is that loneliness can be prevented to a certain degree. Group activities, staying in touch with others, and taking care of your health all help to stay active and socially connected. And while loneliness can be a bigger challenge in older age, today's older generation may actually be better prepared than the generations that follow.
Loneliness is especially a challenge for older people because it's harder to create networks that don't rely on their history. It's difficult to start a new kind of relationship. Having said that, I think there is also more hope with the older population because they have made those kinds of human-to-human interactions and human-to-human relationships in the past, and they know how to do it. And so there's more of a kind of resilience when it comes to the current elderly population. But when it comes to, let's say, like the resilience that older people will have 20 to 30 years from now, maybe they won't be as resilient when it comes to actually forming new kinds of human networks with other people. Asking for help, I think, is going to be really difficult. It's already difficult with this current demographic, but in a society that kind of strives on being perfect, it's difficult to ask for help because it's showing that you are not perfect. And in fact, one of the things that we haven't addressed here is Japan's actually has a high poverty rate for a country that seems to be quite well off. The poverty rate for young people is, I think, 1 in 9 children are under the relative poverty line. And there's an increasing number of single-parent households in Japan as well. So loneliness, I think, is going to be a bigger issue.
Commercial AI companions are not a long-term solution, even if they are popular. That's why the Japanese government focuses on real human contact and strong local communities, the only things that really help. Yuko Itatsu agrees. Digital tools are most useful when they raise awareness about loneliness and make it easier to ask for help.
I think the online solutions are rather effective when it comes to awareness building for people who are outside of this kind of realm, and making sure that there are representations of these populations within the popular culture discourse, I think, is also enormously important to make sure that people understand that this is a real problem and it's a familiar problem for maybe people around them. And so I think these kinds of things are part of the solutions that can be quite important. The other thing I'll mention is that dealing with loneliness is only dealing with the symptoms of a problem, and it's not dealing with the illness itself. So making sure that there's more studies, that there's more projects that allow us to have a deeper understanding of what is causing loneliness in each culture is also going to be quite imperative to solving this issue.
Loneliness is widespread, but still mostly invisible. It affects millions of people of all ages. The causes are complex, as we see in Japan, but mostly loneliness is a sign of bigger changes in society. The growing popularity of chatbots as friends or romantic partners is linked to these changes, and for that reason, the use of emotional AI, it shouldn't be judged any more than loneliness itself. In fact, these trends show how people are trying to cope with changing life conditions. Pop culture and media can help make loneliness more visible, but we also have to understand and question the conditions that create loneliness, because loneliness is more than just an individual problem that can be easily solved. It's a mirror of our society.
You've been listening to a podcast by Digital Mobility in Old Age, a joint initiative by the Digital Opportunities Foundation and O₂ Telefónica Germany, produced by Matthias Röck.